With all the progress made throughout the course, it's time to revise a concept we already had a look at. It's the detached head. You remember, the detached head always happens if you directly check out a commit. Typically, we check out branches and indirectly refer to the latest commit in this branch. When we check out a commit directly by using its ID, then this commit is not part of any specific branch. It's in detached head state. Now, what happens if you do something like this? So you check out an earlier commit, then you add changes to it, and then you want to commit these changes and add these changes to your master branch. Well, that's exactly the case we want to have a look at now in this lecture. And for this, let's first have a look at our structure, just to bring this back to your mind. So we have only our master branch at the moment here. In this master branch, if we quickly check our log, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 commits. And to make this really clear, let's maybe add a dummy.txt file for the moment. And let's quickly add this file with git add dot to add all files to our staging area. And now I'll commit this change right here stating third dummy file added, like this. And if we now go back to our log, we could say, okay, this is a nice state for our latest commit, but here in this previous commit, I forgot to change something, for example, in our second commit text file, just to give you an example here. For this, we simply take this ID, press Q, and now we check out directly this commit. Now we get the information that we are in detached head mode. We had a look at this already previously in our course, and if you log this once again, you see that now this is our detached head. And if we check our branches once again, we now have this detached head branch. Very important, once we leave the detached head mode, this detached head branch, it's not really a branch, as I said, the commit is in the middle of nowhere, so to say. This just indicates that we are in this detached head at this stage. However, this will be lost in the end. It's important to keep this in mind. Now in this detached head mode, we could say that, well, we either forgot to add something here in our second commit. For example, I forgot this part, good to have detached head mode. And we could additionally save this and say we add another file, detached head.txt, for example, just to give you an example here. So we added these two things in our detached head mode. What you can do now is you can use your git status once again, and you see we have an unstaged change right here, and we have an untracked file. So let's add both right here with git add dot. If we now check our status once again, we are now ready to commit these changes. But very important, you get the red warning here. These changes were applied in detached head mode. However, we can commit these changes now with our message, say changes made in detached head, like this. And if we now log this down here, you see we have these changes in here. That's nice. But if I bring back our branches once again, as I said, if we would now try to switch to our master, which we can do right here with git switch master, then, well, you kind of have a problem. Because if we scroll up a bit, you see we are leaving one commit behind, so this latest commit, as I said, was in the middle of nowhere, and we are not connected to any of our branches. And that's the idea of this commit. And you also get the solution here. We have to create a new branch, we know this command, and add this commit ID at the end. This will create a new branch now, which contains this commit. Now, let's save this ID here. And let's now quickly check our git branch command. And as you can see, the detached head is gone. So if you don't save this commit and continue working, then, well, you don't have this commit anymore. It's lost. We have options to bring back such lost commits. This will be covered in the next module. However, typically what you do right here is you now type git branch. Now we give it a name, maybe detached head, something like this. And now you add the ID as we saw it above here in your recommendations in Git up here. If we do that, we have created a new branch, as can be seen right here. And now we can switch to this detached head branch we just created. A detached branch, very nice. It's of course not detached branch, it's detached head. Sorry, this is of course my bad here, like this. Now we are in this branch. And in this branch, we have the detached head text file, and we have what we added here, the text we implemented in our second commit file. So that's nice. Now I have two branches, but actually I would like to have this content in my master branch. What can we do now? Well, we can of course use our merge command, which we already know. So let's quickly switch to our master branch here and now merge the master branch and the detached head branch. So git merge detached head. Let's do this now, and suddenly we got back our detached head now in the master branch and also the changes here in our second commit. So this is how you can save changes made in detached head mode. As an alternative, you can also create this detached head branch, as I called it, before you switch to the master branch. So you can create the branch, which contains the commit, and then merge both branches. I can quickly show you this here. So let's quickly log the data. Let's now say I want to go back to this commit here maybe. Let's check this out. Check out this commit right here. So we are back a bit. Now I go to the first commit maybe and add something like this was also added in detached head mode. Now we save this. Now again, to quickly show you this from the branch level, we are again in the detached head mode. Now we can quickly add the file to our staging area and commit this change. Let's call it text added in detached head, like this. And I forgot the quotation marks at the end. Sorry, my bad. It still worked here, so it's not a big problem. And now I'll create a new branch, git branch, and call it detached head solution 2, maybe. So we now create this new branch. Let's check all our branches here. So here we have this solution 2 branch. And if we now switch back to our master branch, git switch master, we are back in the master branch. And now we can merge our master with the detached head dash solution dash 2 branch. If we do that, we are back in our master. We have our detached head text we created in our first approach for detached head. We also have the text in here, which we added there. And we also have our text here in the initial commit we just added in our second approach with the detached head mode. Both approaches lead to the same result. Here you at least don't get a warning. So I typically use this one here. What we can do now, of course, is if we check all our branches here, well, we can say we don't need these two detached head branches. So let's say git branch and now dash capital D. So we want to delete these two branches. We delete the detached head and the detached head dash solution dash 2. If we do that and again run our branch command, we see we are back in our master branch now with these changes implemented. So as you can see again, it's very important to understand where you're working in, what the head is, what the detached head is, what branches and commits are, and how all these things interact. With that, we are almost finished with this module. There is only one last concept I would like to introduce to you. Up to this point in the course, our assumption was that all files in our working directory are required for our project and therefore should be managed by Git and also added to our commits. Now in a real-world project, you have cases where this is not true for all your files and folders. This could be log files or, for example, files related to your IDE configuration, just to name two examples right here. However, you have files which you might need or want to have in your project folder, but not as part of your version management. For such cases, we have the option to tell Git that it should ignore some files or folders. We can do this by creating a so-called .gitignore file. The .gitignore file typically is created manually in your root folder of your project. So basically here we have the Git basics folder in my case, and here at this top level, you create this gitignore file. The file must be created manually by yourself, so we simply create this file and now call it .gitignore, like this. And here we can now specify, well, which data, which files, which directories should be ignored by Git. Let's get started, very simple, and let's create a log file. Let's call it test.log, for example, and we could say that this file is actually not required here for our actual project. Now let's quickly explore the Git status in here. As you can see, we have two files, two untracked files in our master branch, the git ignore file and the log file. The ignore file must be added and also committed. That's important, so it must be included in your project, but the test log file actually should not. For this, we can now go to our git ignore file and now tell Git that our test.log file, well, should not be included. If we now run git status once again, you see that the test log file is no longer displayed here. Git completely ignores this file now, so you can't even add it to your staging area. You could also have multiple log files in here. So let's maybe create our test2.log file, and let's assume you have plenty of these files. What you could of course do now is you could also add test2.log to your git ignore file, and then all these files would be ignored. But the better approach right here is to simply add the asterisk right here. This simply means that Git ignores all files which end with .log, no matter what's written here before the actual file ending. If we do that, and again run git status, you see that the test2.log file is not displayed here as untracked file. Very important here also at this stage, you have these untracked files here, as you know, then you have the tracked file if you add the files to the staging area, and then we now added these ignored files here. So this is also helpful at this stage of the course, if you always think about these three different types of files we have. So untracked, tracked, and ignored. Ignored was just added right here with the git ignore file. You can also do this the other way around. So you could say that you want to exclude all log files, but one specific log file, for example, should be included. If you want to do this, you simply add the exclamation mark and then give the file name, including the file type, to tell git ignore that this file, well, should not be ignored. So this would be, for example, test.log, right? So this would mean that we ignore all log files, but test.log should be included. This should be listed as untracked file in our case here. Let's do this again. And as you see, now test log is displayed here. So you have plenty of options here how to ignore files. Of course, this is also not limited to log files. This can be HTML files, text file, any kind of file type you want to exclude here. This is possible. You can also exclude entire folders. Let's maybe create a new folder for this. Let's call it web app. We'll delete this soon, so no worries at this stage. And in this web app folder, we could add an index.html file and maybe a styles.css file in here. So we now have a completely new folder, but actually we don't want this folder as part of our project. What we can do now is we can go to our git ignore file and now say that we want to have, so starting relatively from our git ignore file from the root folder here, our web app folder in here should be ignored, including all files and other folders it might contain, like this. If we now run git status, you see this folder is not recognized. Of course, if I would delete this here and save it and run git status once again, then this folder, including all the other files, would of course be part of our version management logic right here. So this is how the git ignore file works. The way we would implement it right here though is just for our local project. You can also create a global git ignore file, so to make sure that for all your Git managed project, certain files are excluded. This is not part of the course at this stage though. With that, we now learned all the core basics about Git. Therefore, in the next lecture, I'll summarize some of the core commands and concepts we had a look at. Before we do that though, I quickly want to get rid of all files and folders we just created. So we'll quickly do this with git clean -df, so to force the deletion. And if you do this, you see we have the initial state back of our project. With that, let's conclude this module.